Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is December 18th. We are coming at you for the week of December 18th through the 24th. Cannot believe how fast this year is gone and that we're essentially at the turn of the year. Just crazy.
The passing of time is, you say, I feel this every year. Like, one could say this every year. You're like, are you kidding me?
Well, when one does.
Yeah.
We do.
One being
so at a
me.
certain point, you're right. I also, find that because my life follows time, I'm clocking all of these times, the weekly podcast, the monthly, the gathering, the daily videos, the daily writing. I have a relationship to the, advancing age date as each day passes. Always blows me away. But we sort of are finishing up the year a little bit gentler than many of the months of this year. I think the week itself is marked mostly by the solstice and what Mercury retrograde is doing, including the gathering that happens in every Mercury retrograde of the sun and the backwards-facing planet of mind. We will talk all about that. But first,
A question.
We have a question. So, Rhiannon, I'm finally getting to it. This was one of the first questions that came in. And so I was like, oh, look, a question. And then I just got bombarded with questions. And so this one sort of got down a little bit lower on my list, Rhiannon. But here we are. It's also a similar question to one we answered the other day about shapes in a chart. It's about yods in charts, which are a kind of complex little pattern that can show up in a birth chart as well as in transits. So let us read Rhiannon's question. Well, she starts out with some blah, blah, blah that I won't read. My question is, I would love to hear your perspective on what it might mean to be born with a yod in one's chart. I happen to be born with 2. I'm also wondering if this is rare. I have had a few natal chart readings before, and no astrologer has mentioned these yods in my chart. I first heard of yods from you this past March 8th, I believe it was, which ended up being a more dramatic night, which is why it stuck out to me. Then on a recent site, I pulled up my chart. It showed all of the patterns, and I was a little struck to see that I was born with 2 yods in my chart. It feels a little intense. If you think this might be helpful to your general audience, I would love to hear more about this. Thank you so much for all you do for your community. It is greatly appreciated. Much love. And blessings to you, Rhiannon. So yes, yods are a very interesting pattern to show up on a chart. So let's break a couple of things down about it. Let's just start with like what it is. Why is it called a yod? Y-O-D. A yod in navigation is a vector from side to side that a moving body will make in order to get from a trajectory A to B. So like a ship does not cross the ocean in a straight line. It has to continually shoot back and forth, left and right to catch the wind in its sails. So those narrow angles of shift that the boat goes in to catch the sails is called a yod.
Oh.
Yeah. So I also think it's interesting that in Hebrew, the letter that we would think of as Y is called yod, or yod, Y-O-D, it's how we would pronounce it. And the yod is also the name for the pointer with which you read the Torah. You do not ever touch the page. So you have this pointer to point at the words, and that pointer is called the yod. So in both of these word usages, we have a sense of pointing, navigation, looking at what we want to look at. And that's what a yod generates. And to have one in a chart, you need 3, at least, bodies where two of them are forming a sextile, a 60-degree angle, like a blunt end of the pointy arrow, is this two planets that work well together. That's the essence of a sextile. And then a planet across the way that splits that sextile up and hits each of them in the narrow 150-degree angle, the inconjunct, the one I love so much and never stop talking about.
Mhm.
And the reason I talk about this angle so much is because it implies an energetic fork in the road where we leave the freeway we are on and take the exit ramp. Exit ramp is a powerful idea in consciousness. It means we're no longer on the freeway we've been on, but it also means we haven't quite gotten anywhere yet. We're simply leaving the old place behind. Okay? Now, if you put together a pattern where there are two of these forced exits leaving the freeway at the same time, we call it a yod, or a finger of God, or a finger of fate. Now we get that nice little Torah image where we're pointing at the words of God literally on the page. So when a yod is activated, it is thought to create fated movement forward. You got to make a choice. And that's actually where the two planets in sextile come in, because sextiles are two energies that are working so well together. It's like an opportunity. That's the two energies in a yod that say, okay, I can get this motor running. And then the pointy end of the yod, that planet, is the direction, sort of the way shower energy. So when a yod is triggered in a chart, meaning a planet swipes by any of the corners of it, although the juicy corner will either be a conjunction with the pointy end planet or an opposition to that pointy end planet, which would actually be halfway between the two sextiling planets. I know this is a lot of visual imagery.
Yeah, I was just putting
Some
that
of you will
in
get
my
that
brain.
completely, and others of you will have had an aneurysm just trying to listen. Don't try too hard. The point, though, is that when the yod is triggered by a transiting planet or even the moon every lunar cycle, that person has the potential for being lifted up and helped in forward movement by the hands of God or the winds of fate, or any cute little phrase you want to use to describe when we take action and the universe seems to help us along. So, are they rare? No. Are they infrequent? Maybe. There's certainly, I don't know if rare would be the right word, of having two, because once the planets are engaged in their splashing out across the whole ecliptic and spread out, the potential for patterns is rich. But it's definitely infrequent, and when you have one in your chart, there will certainly be moments in your life where you will change the direction you are on, like leaving a freeway and going into some unknown new territory, where you will be and feel pushed forward and carried by the winds of fate as you make such choices. They're quite stunning to have in a chart. So the big December juice is in Mercury's backward motion. So Mercury went retrograde last week, right in concomitance with the new moon, setting us into a inward process that's going to last all the way across the threshold of the new year, and Mercury goes direct on January 1st. I love that. I love the elegance of being pushed into a process where mind, thought, and perception, Mercury, are in the sign that we're about to move into, mansion-wise, where we cross the threshold of the year and think about the desires, ambitions, and the goals that we have. That's Capricorn's sort of reason for existing. So Mercury, the driver of all of this through our perceptions, is already in that mansion, even though we haven't quite entered it. And he's taking us on an investigation in the realms below, so that when we move into the Capricorn mansion this week and we cross over the threshold into the new year and we're thinking about our goals and ambitions for the year to come, and then we hit the new moon in Capricorn in January where we set those intentions, It's like the ground is being prepared.
Hmm.
Just like we dig a trough in the earth to plant seeds, below the surface of the earth, Mercury retrogrades take us below the surface of our consciousness, like we're digging a little trench inside of which we get to put seeds that next year we get to water.
It feels like extremely appropriate for the turning of the year. For it, in our calendar, we're prepping for the new year, and Mercury retrograde is prepping
and including
us.
the difficulty of the time. Yeah, absolutely. Love that. So we do have a couple of ways this week that Mercury is activated. Actually, a big one, too, when we get to the inferior conjunction. But I get a little ahead of myself. Just in terms of the triple transits, we hit 3 of them this week, 2 of which are the very positive and stabilizing transits of this retrograde. And one of them is the, I would say, the most retrograde-y of what Mercury is going to be doing. So let's just talk about the positives for a moment. Well, it's funny that you would say it that way, Zoe, because I don't usually talk about the positive transits because my thought is you don't need any help with that. Like a positive is easy to embrace. But yes, so we'll take a look at what Mercury trining Jupiter and sextiling Saturn might have brought you a few weeks ago that might be coming up again this week. So Mercury in a trine with Jupiter is fabulous. It means our perception and our sense of possibility and abundance and expansion are working really well together. So since Mercury is how we perceive, if Jupiter's so positively in the room, then our perceptions are going to reflect things like hope, confidence, a sense of power and purpose with what we want to create. So back to the idea of crossing the threshold of the old year into the new year in a moment where the world has gone mad, this is a hopeful transit, and we get to marinate in that a little bit, and that hits today. If you want to glance back to when this hit before, it was the 7th of December when Mercury first trine Jupiter, and now today is the hit with him moving backwards. So there might be some unfolding, some positive outcome, some idea, some yummy conversation that might have hit somewhere around December 7th. It might be coming up again now. On Thursday of this week, Mercury will sextile Saturn, a stabilizing kind of working well with responsibility, focus, and discipline transit that hits on Thursday, but that also hit back right at the beginning of December 2nd. So this is a fabulous transit for negotiation and getting, your words into your responsibility demands. So you might have had some kind of a negotiation that went well or an idea about how to build something that you're up to that came into your consciousness just at the beginning of the month that might be returning to your focus this week. It's the Sesca square with Uranus that's going to trip us up. And that hits tomorrow, Tuesday. So the Sesca square is 135-degree geometry. It's pure friction, just about frustration and bother. So Mercury retrograde shenanigans are often frustrating and bothersome, right? So you've got a transit that is quite literally designed to create communicative frustration and bother that's hitting as part of this retrograde tomorrow that first hit on the 6th of December. Now, that means that the trine with Jupiter and the first Sesca square with Uranus happened together, 6th and 7th of December. That means that the positive yummy trine with Jupiter mitigated or softened the bumps of the Uranus Sesca square. That may happen today and tomorrow as well, because we've got this trine to Jupiter today and the Sesca square tomorrow. But I'll say this. Back in early December, Mercury wasn't turned around yet. Now he is. And Uranus, who he's contacting tomorrow in this friction, invented computers. and the internet and streaming and digital technology and solar flares and grids and all the electronics and stuff. So you can expect some shenanigans as we cross between, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and maybe even Wednesday. Expect some stuff to be bothersome in the way that Mercury retrogrades often generates. Winter solstice, kids. Here in the north, it's winter solstice. To my friends down under, it is summer. So my apologies. Every time we get to one of the solstices, we have this sort of this conundrum of it's, one way up here and one way down there. In the equinoxes, at least, it's, equal day and night length for both hemispheres, even though the season is different. The energetic reflection of an equinox is balance and harmony. And in the solstice, we go to the extremes. What I love about a world order where we are one sort of global community in a way that we just never were in the past, we still get to have a sense of balance and harmony when the solstices sort of split the difference, where we're shortest day up north and longest day down south. Is harmony and balance only exists when we get big enough in our consciousness to hold the whole world in our heart, where we are the stabilizing creator of the harmony at a moment when the world is reflecting something back to us that looks like disharmony. So again, forgiving me for those of you down under, I'm going to focus the rest of my chitty chat on the winter solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. When it's dark out there, we find the light within. And that's the essence of the solstice, the winter solstice celebration, that we find some ritualized way to honor that we are never away from the light, even when we have to move through the dark. I always mention this time of year that we have holidays that honor this with candle lightings and lights that are strung up to represent fertile trees in the middle of winter. And those are symbols of the rich bounty that we know is coming again, even though we have to pass through this sense of dark. And of course, the equinoxes and the solstices, as the beginnings of seasons, are the first pillars of extended consciousness that human beings grappled with. Like, we first found our connection to the divine by looking up and down. So we look up and we see the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and that created a kind of devotion by saying, oh, look at those big things that are bigger than us but are part of us. And then the earth herself, we honored the earth through Gaian, pagan rituals and celebrations that all emanated first from the natural world. So I do think that when we honor the solstices in a modern world, that we are tapping into something that is profoundly fundamental, basic in our DNA. That is, we know when and where we are by virtue of our relationship to the sun. Like, we have these pineal glands in the middle of our brains that are responding to sunlight every millisecond that we are alive. Why do you think everybody hates daylight savings time so much? Because we're keeping track in an organic way inside our minds, in our brains. And then when we fuck with that by changing the hour, we get all thrown off for a little while. Me more than some. Boy, it takes me about 2 weeks before I can tell what time it is based on the light. So I think honoring these equinox and solstice moments gets us in touch with something that's primal and in our very bodies. And I love that. Anything that leads me to be able to say, this is why I'm your ambassador to conscious embodiment, is because our bodies know what's what. Our bodies understand that we're in the shortest day, the longest night, the most dark. And our bodies know somehow that the light is coming again. And on the 22nd of December, we want to honor that in some way. I have a big ass ritual planned for this solstice, even actually going somewhere.
Oh, where are you going?
Oh, it's local. I'm just going someplace to create an aura of ritual.
Nice. And I know that people are going to ask, and they always ask, what do you suggest for this ritual? If I'm a listener and I'm like, Michael, I want to do that too, what would you recommend on a broad sense?
I'm thinking about the idea of Mercury retrograde below the surface, and the idea that in order for something powerful to be reborn or born anew, we have to allow a death. The solstice, winter solstice, is our energetic death, where we surrender to the idea of death and then trust that we will be reborn. So in that regard, I would do something like an inventory of the old life, of all of the stuff you're looking to be free of as you enter a new year, as we cross the threshold of the year, and then burn that. Burn that paper. Maybe take the ashes and stick them in a house plant or in your garden. Water the garden a little bit as if you're literally planting a seed of intention to allow the old world's death to be the fertilizer that allows the new world to be, born anew, which we do at the new moon in Capricorn. And if that doesn't speak to you, just remember this, the idea that we create some kind of symbol for the light that we always carry within, even if it's just to do a prayer with a candle, where you acknowledge the lighting of the candle is a direct reflection of your own capacity to light the spark of life within you. It's within your control to do so at any given moment. You make that a little prayer and you do it on the solstice. Now it's a bona fide, powerful ritual. Also on the 22nd is an important moment in the Mercury retrograde cycle. In fact, the most important moment in every retrograde cycle happens exactly halfway between the turnaround and the stationing direct. So we are on the 22nd at that exact midpoint, and at that midpoint moment, the sun and the retrograding Mercury come together by conjunction. In fact, it has a specific name when Mercury's retrograde. We call it the inferior conjunction because from our vantage point, Mercury will be in front of the sun. That's interesting because the sun is our life force. We are the loving, feminine energy that looks back at the sun and creates life itself. And Mercury in the inferior conjunction coming in between that. To me, that's a powerful visual of what a Mercury retrograde is generating, right? He disappears from view, sort of, by going backwards. And then at the midpoint, he crosses in front of the sun as if to deliver to us, through the sun's power of conscious awareness, stuff that he's been touching on in the realms below.
Cool.
So we usually get an aha moment on the inferior conjunction. We were often downloaded with wisdom we need, or we get a clarity about the theme of what the retrograde is bringing us. It's definitely a day to be paying attention to the conversations you're having, the thoughts that are rising up, the negotiations you're engaged in, and most importantly, the trickstery ways that we get communication from Mercury. Like Mercury is literally a trickster in mythology, and so we carry that tricksterish into our astrological representation of what Mercury brings. And so happy accidents, synchronicities, outrageous coincidences, billboards that match your mood, songs on the radio that sort of inform something, all the funny ways that we can be surprised by communication in these sideways ways. Look for that on Thursday, maybe a little bit Wednesday and Friday too. There could be some important guidance that comes, and more importantly, anything that occurs to you around the 22nd when you're in that solstice ritual energy of contemplation could be important in terms of speaking to themes or ideas that your soul and your psyche are crunching down below the surface, so that when Mercury turns around on January 1st, we can incorporate and integrate some of this wisdom into our ongoing day-to-day experience in life. But you might get treated to some important stuff about what that looks like for you on the 22nd. So before we switch gears and move into dream interpretation section of the podcast, I want to cover a little something that's happening over the weekend energetically. And as always, I'm going to do a little Venus update because, like I've said, I want to follow Venus very directly until she returns to Leo. Right in the middle of the week on Wednesday, Venus is going to oppose Uranus. Now, Venus is in Scorpio, kids, so emotions are much more intense. And an opposition between Venus and Uranus is the unexpected, and anything can happen and probably will in your love experience, your emotional processing experience, could be your finances. And it's interesting that just last week, Venus opposed Jupiter, kind of generating a big flood of deeper reactions to things emotionally. And while that transit is well in our rearview mirror, Venus is still in Scorpio, so we are more emotionally triggerable, not just because Venus is in the sign that she's not very comfortable in. It's just too intense for her loving sensibilities. That we just had an opposition with Jupiter, creating a kind of over-the-top reactivity in our emotional body. I think that this opposition, we might be even more sensitive to things that happen we didn't expect, moods that change out of nowhere that impact us. Endings or beginnings in relationship, either ones that come from the outside or the inside. Now, this is not a major transit, kids, so don't get too worried about who you're dating right now. I'm just letting you know that since Venus is so activated, understand that in the middle of the week, there's a very, very excitatory, anything can happen and probably will, new piece of emotional, relational information that comes up. And then on Saturday, Venus hits the North Node in the Great Eliminator angle that I love so much, the 150-degree inconjunct. That's a track change energy led by the heart and feelings that may have changed. That's why I'm bringing this up, kids, because just understand that some of you will be experiencing a mid-wake, dramatic, potentially, awareness of what your heart desires and wants. And by the time we move through the weekend, we're in a position to change some track that we're on because of something that we are now in touch with in terms of how we are feeling about something. So overall, it's a fairly mild week with an opportunity both to collect some information from Mercury as he connects with the sun, celebrate the solstice, and receive a few more pieces of wisdom from Venus, kids. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email-in dream from Tasmin. I hope that's how you pronounce your name. This dream is actually like reminds me of a lot of dreams we got early on in the podcast. So I figured I'd read this because it seems quite common. And you'll see the
Great.
themes that I'm talking about. So Tasmin says, "Hi, I had such a strange dream last night. I was at a hotel with my husband. We were in our room. I wanted to go to the bar, and he was already drunk. We left our room, and in the hallway, there was this living room. A friend of my husband's was sitting there, and they said hi and high-fived. We continued on down the hall. When we arrived to the elevator, there were several people already there. We all got on, but as soon as we did, everyone started to scramble because it was one of those elevators that you needed your room key to make work. I grabbed my card, no problem, and put it in. As I did so, some lights flashed and all the numbers that were already pressed went off. I pressed 6 because that's where I assumed the bar was. Someone else had pressed 3. Then the elevator started to go down, but suddenly it started free falling. When I looked up, there was no ceiling, and we had sunk down into the earth, and I could see the sky / the surface above us, and we continued to fall. Then I woke myself up. And then here's a little context she added. We just found out we are pregnant, and my husband has had drinking issues in the past. My husband is 36. I'm 33. But I feel like we will have our second pregnancy when I'm 36. Not sure if this means anything.
Well, I think it means absolutely, something that such an enormous life event is coming concomitantly with this particular dream, right? So that if Tasmin offers us this context, I have to take it and put the context into my holding of the dream. And of course,
well,
it makes
for me,
complete total sense. Certainly, it makes. Yeah. See, right there, it makes sense to you intuitively just listening to the dream. And so if we break down the imagery piece by piece and sort of get the theme as the dream is presented to us, we start with a hotel, which means we're in some kind of a transition. Homes are always about self, but temporary homes are about a temporary experience of self. And of course, this one has to do with her role as a wife and obviously as a mother and as a mother-to-be, because that's ipso facto. We know that from her context. But the dream is absolutely about a temporary self-investigation that has something very much to do with who she is vis-a-vis her marriage. It's interesting. I wanted to go to the bar. He was already drunk. Right there is something interesting about Tasmin has a desire for a recreational moment, a relaxing moment, a kind of, letting go moment. Husband's already there. So now we know that husband has drinking challenges. And so somewhere I want to go to the bar, but he's already drunk has got to do, I think, something to do with the power differential when somebody can go to the bar without a problem. And the other one is like, yeah, well, he's already in that place. There's a pregnancy coming in waking life. Bar is about escapism. Maybe I may be reading way into this, but she wants to have a kind of light, easy experience of this, and he's already there. He's already not. I got to be careful of that. That feels like a bit of a projection, and I don't have her here to give us a clarity. And he has a friend in the hallway. So we do know that the transition, hallways are always about transitions, right? So the room suggests the, Tasmin's sort of sense of self. And then elevators, which I'll get to in a section, are about exploring up and down in consciousness. But the hallway is a direct reflection of that this dream is coming at a moment when there's a transition happening. Hallways are like transitions. I'm not sure exactly what to make about the fact that the husband has a friend in the hallway that he high-fives. But it does tell us that for this I've just popped into my head. If this is Tasmin's dream and her consideration, perhaps this is another spin on the husband, that he's somewhat irrelevant in this transitional piece. He's good.
Yeah.
He's high-fiving, right? He's good in this moment. She's the one who's about to go into some chaos. She's also about to make a child in her body and then squeeze it out of a tiny little hole.
I mean, that's wild.
And that's right. I mean, even that, it's like the elevator chaos. If we just think of elevators as a good symbol of transition, that even just having that piece of context that that's about to happen in her body and in her marriage and in her family, that the chaotic change that the elevator sequence of the dream gave us might connect to that she's anticipating a great shift. So elevators, what do elevators do? They easily allow us access to different layers of our consciousness at will. We push a button, we can show up at a whole other area of who we are. Great image for self-investigation, right? For exploring in a hotel, all of the different aspects of self that might want to be considered. The elevator takes us there. So then the elevator has some importance. Tasmin needs to explore some things, probably in the direction of what 3 and 6 might represent. Because she picks floor 6 and someone else picks floor 3, and because it's Tasmin's dream, we're going to honor 3 as well. I love this because 3 is about creativity. Mother, father, child is a perfect 3 consciousness. 6 is the number of partnerships and marriages. 2 3s coming together form 6.
Oh, I didn't know. I knew 3, but I was wondering what 6 was.
Yeah, 6 is literally the marriage of community, partnership, pairing, marriage, all of what happens after we discover the singularity of 1, the pairing off of 2, the creativity of 3, the foundation of 4, the freedom of 5. Once we have that foundation, then 6 allows us to share everything with another. All right? So I love that 3 and 6 are part of this because it speaks to both sort of marriage and pregnant woman. So then what I love about this dream is that you can think of the elevator going up and down through floors and the chaos of the keys, all of those people in the elevator scrambling for their keys. Those are thoughts that Tasmin is having, right? It's not their dream, it's her dream. So all of that chaotic thought, thinking about this, thinking about partnership, thinking about marriage, thinking about bodies, thinking about pregnancy, thinking about drinking, thinking about what's next. What happens at the end of this dream? She free falls into the center of the great mother herself. So I love that ending because to me it says, get out of the intellect. The thinking is not helping. Just fall into a surrender of, I got this. I know what I'm doing. And even if I don't know in my mind, my body does know. And the dream free-falling her into the center of the earth to me is the evidence that her soul knows this and wants her to know this as well.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.